Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to PowerPoint number 4, Introduction to Accounts Payable and Accounts Receivables. Basically looking at basic business payables. Now, these concepts not only apply in the business world, but they apply in our own personal business as well. And to kind of give you an overview of what we'll be looking at what exactly are accounts payable, accounts receivable. We'll be looking at why checks are still being used today, why it's important to still write checks. We'll also be looking at how to fill out and complete a check and to maintain a running balance or log on our own personal accounts. All right, so let's get things started. The big ideas. We're going to look at how do some businesses and individuals conduct transactions and track their spending. Look, you've got to know where your money's going, right? A wise businessman once said that it's good to know where your money is going and you tell it where it's going as opposed to you wondering where your money went, right? So you got to track. Then you got to figure out what are good ways to spend. Now, a lot of these concepts that we'll learn here will also tie over when we learn about personal finance and personal banking and banking and transactions and such. That'll come in our second quarter together for the 8th grade. And if you're in my 7th grade course, well, we'll get to that if you decide to take me as an 8th grader. All right, we'll also look at why and how are checks written. Do people still write checks? Why? Why not? Because there's a lot of things that you'll find are standard in the business world that necessarily aren't standard in the consumer world, all right? Two different worlds, okay? But both kind of relate to each other. All right, so this video is structured for our 8th graders, so we're going to go ahead and get past this. All right, and look at the 8th grade essential questions. All right, so first thing we're going to look at deals with standard 040. What is important to know about paying bills and keeping up with accounting records? All right, in your business world, you've got to know who's getting paid, why they're getting paid, all right? In the business world, you're going to have to pay the electric company, right, for the electric coming into your business. But in the home life, in your personal life, you're also going to have to pay the electric bill, right? So there's a lot of similarities and commonalities between personal business and your everyday business, all right? And then everybody has to keep up with accounting records. Now, the way that accounting is done in the business world is a little bit different than our personal lives. But there, again, are some interrelation between the two. We're going to look at what are some tools that might be able to help tender transactions and track account records. When I say tender, I'm not talking about taking a tough piece of steak, whacking it with a meat hammer several times to make it tender. No, what I'm talking about is making the transaction occur, okay? Finalizing the transaction and making the funds go from one spot to the other, okay? And tracking those records. All right, so what will be introduced? We're going to look at, again, as I said earlier, checks, all right? Yes, checks are still used in modern business, all right? And it's not just something that grandma and grandpa write, okay? So we're going to look at checks and check writing and how there's still some legal ramifications when dealing with checks. We're going to look at check writing, how to properly fill out a check, all right? You'll be surprised that this is a skill that a lot of people don't know and have to be taught by their bank. You're going to know it when you leave my class. We're going to look at what payables are, okay? What exactly is a payable? Because believe it or not, businesses might have a division called accounts payable, okay? You might have a payable, okay? Additionally, we're going to look at receivables, okay? A business might have accounts receivables, either as their own division or combined with accounts payables. You might have a receivable. It all depends. Every business is different. Every situation is different, all right? We're going to look at logs and registers, which is how we keep track of where our money is going. All right, so first things first. Checks. Why in the world do people still write checks? I mean, that's just a crazy idea. It's a crazy concept, right? But checks are still used in many personal and business transactions. And there are several reasons why, all right? Businesses like to write other businesses checks because it doesn't cost extra money beyond the cost to print the check, right? There's additional security that's built in to the checks themselves. We're going to cover that, all right? All right, so let's consider this for a second, all right? As a consumer, we like the idea of going to Publix or Chick-fil-A or going to a place of business and then taking our credit card, inserting it into the machine, right? And letting the machine read it and take out our money, right? And that's fine, okay? But in business, there is a fee associated with that, okay? Now that fee might be 2%. It might be 0.5%. Each business is different, right? But there's a fee that comes off. So what that means is that every time a credit card or a debit card is used, okay, instead of making $100, you might be making $98 in total revenue, okay? That's with a 2%, okay? If it's a 0.5%, it might be $99.50, okay? But there's still a fee involved there, okay? Businesses, so they don't incur fees on other people, right, will often write another business a check. Why? Because there is no loss. There is no percentage taken away, okay? Additionally, checks have additional security built in on them, and they are bound by state laws, all right? If somebody decides to manipulate or change a check, they are breaking rules and violations, right? In fact, when somebody cashes a check, right, they are telling the bank, hey, bank, I want you to pay only this person and only the person that the check is written to, the amount written on the check, and I want that money to become out of my account. So I authorize you, bank, to pay these people this kind of money, however they want to get paid, all right? So, yeah. Checks are also heavily controlled and regulated. There are various state laws and federal laws regulating checks themselves. They are a very secure way of doing business and making business happen, okay? So checks are still used, all right? They also give extended and limited time for making the transaction happen. Here's what I mean by that, all right? All right, Mr. C used to receive a check from his grandfather when he was still alive, right? And I would receive a check as a gift, okay, either on my birthday or around the holidays, okay? So let's take the holidays, for instance, all right? I want you to think about this, okay? Grandpa would always make sure that I would receive the check in the mail sometime between the first week of the holiday, in other words, between Thanksgiving Day and Christmas, so usually the first week of December, okay? And he knew that that check probably would not be opened or cashed, and that envelope that that check came in would not be cashed out or open until Christmas Day. Okay. Usually he wrote those checks right before Thanksgiving Day so that they can be sent in the mail. All right. So this is a check that was written before Thanksgiving. Okay. Was shipped through the mail. Okay. Sent to my house. Okay. Where it was addressed to me. And of course my sister got one and all that good stuff, usually in a card. And that card with the envelope and the check inside of it went underneath the tree. Okay. And that was usually not opened until Christmas. All right. And that's fine, okay? That's how it happened, all right? And usually right around Christmas time, we'd open our gifts and so on and so forth, and we'd open up the envelope, and of course the bank wasn't open, so we couldn't immediately go cash it, right? But out of respect, we would always call Grandpa, say, thank you very much for the check. It's a generous gift. I'm either going to put it in my savings account, or I'm going to go buy something with it, or do half and half. And we'd always have a conversation and so on and so forth, out of respect for giving the gift, right? Well, again, that check was written before Thanksgiving, and we usually didn't cash that until after Christmas. So that usually meant about 6 weeks that check was just sitting out there, okay? Well, all right, that's fine, okay? Now, when we took that check to the bank, we were pretty sure that the check would be good. Okay. In other words, they would be able to pay us, and I'd be able to use that money and make that transaction happen however I wanted to, whether I wanted to put the money into my savings account, whether I wanted to put it into my checking account, however I wanted to make it happen, right? So checks give extended and limited time for tender, which is a good thing, but they could also be a bad thing, all right? I had a situation where I was feeling bad for somebody, and I wrote them a check, okay? They were having a hard time paying their bills, so on and so forth. So out of bleeding heart and feelings, I decided to give them a check. Okay, well, that's fine, all right? And a few weeks go by, and I noticed that the check hadn't cleared my bank. So I contacted them, and they told me, hey, I misplaced it, but things are looking a little bit better now, so I won't need to use that check. Well, great. Okay, no big deal. Well, about 3 months later, okay, the check transacted through my bank. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought they didn't need it, right? Well, because my check didn't say void after a certain period of time, usually it's 120 days, 90 days, or 180 days, right? Because it didn't have that little notice on there, they were still able to cash that check, and my bank honored that check, okay? That wasn't good because I was not expecting it. It was very difficult for me to pay my bills at that time. All right. So you got to be careful when you're writing checks. All right. All right. Sometimes checks are electronically tendered. That means as soon as you give them to, say, Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart, that money is instantly taken out. Sometimes it has to go through a process, okay? There are various bank rules and regulations that make that happen, okay? Sometimes when you use your credit card or debit card, that money comes out right away. Sometimes it takes a few minutes or even up to a day or two to process. Each business and each place is different, all right? There are various things inside checks that help keep them safe, okay, and secure, okay? One of those things that you're trying to do when you create and write a check is prevent fraud. Fraud is essentially, let's see if I have that definition on here. Nope. Fraud is essentially doing things with the intent, right, to do harm to another, okay? Especially when it comes to, not physically, okay, but maybe you're creating a check with a bank that doesn't really exist and manipulating the numbers or accounts that don't exist, and you're getting the money from that, okay? Well, to help with that, there was the Micker System, or the Magnetic Ink Character Recognition System. And the idea of the Micker is that on a check, and you'll see what a check looks like here in the next lesson, that the numbers on the bottom of a check are written with magnetic ink, okay? And then they slide these checks through this little reader at the cash register or at the bank, right? And it verifies the information that's on there, okay? And that helps prevent fraud. In other words, it helps the bank so that they're not giving money based off of an account that doesn't exist, or two, right, making sure that if you write a check to somebody, okay, that the person that you wrote to isn't manipulating or changing the numbers on the check itself, all right? But yeah, so big takeaways are, one, checks are recognized as a legal transaction because they are a contract or an order for your bank to pay somebody on your behalf, okay? Two, you got to be careful when you write a check and if somebody doesn't cash it, okay, or use it right away, and you're expecting that to happen, okay, you might have to void the check depending on the amount. However, it might cost more money to void the check. It depends, right? Checks are still used by businesses, okay, and still used by people, okay, because businesses, like, my business, I prefer checks. Why do I prefer checks and cash? Because every time I use my Square app, it costs me 5%. That's a lot of money, right? If I go to a gig and somebody wants to buy my CD and they want to buy my CD with a credit card, okay, I'll be glad to make the transaction happen, okay, but it's going to cost me extra, okay, to make that transaction happen, okay? In other words, it's going to cost me a percentage, okay? So those are the big takeaways. All right, so on Google Classroom, you will find that there are 2 different slides to answer for Activity 1. Go ahead and answer the slides dealing with these different things, okay? And just think about number 1 there as where you might use a check to pay for something, right? And it's pretty obvious. If you have to use Google to Google it, that's fine, right? And I think I covered the rest in pretty good details here. Let's see, I covered that one, and ooh, let's see what you guys get for number 6 there, all right? Let's see what you guys do for number 6, all right? And yeah, that comes to the end of this particular lesson. And look, we are less than 15 minutes in.